started sewing, I jokingly say that I was born with a needle in my hand, or that I give my mom the fault. It's my mom's fault. Because apparently, well, my mom loved to sew.
Yeah.
She was always a big sewer. She would sew all my dresses and hers, and a lot of my dad's clothing, and later my brother's clothing, and so on. She enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And so she would have me sitting on the windowsill in front of the sewing machine, that she could keep an eye out for me and not me get into all kinds of trouble.
Yeah.
And I think I just shared that with her later on. So 3 years old and 4 years old, I would always grab all the extra buttons she had and all the scrap materials, and that's what I'd be sewing. I was only allowed to sew by hand because I couldn't do as much damage there as with a sewing machine. So, but she would have to thread the needle because I couldn't do it yet myself. And but I was always sewing on buttons. Yeah. And starting at about age 6, she couldn't keep me away from the machine anymore. So as soon as she turned her back, then I'm sitting there and tinkering on it. Yeah. My first foray on the machine was at my grandma's house, and Mom was doing laundry there. We didn't have our own washing machine, so we went to Grandma's house and did it. Yeah. Grandma wasn't home, luckily for me. Yeah. I must have been about 4 years old because my brother was just walking. Yeah. So that's where I didn't have an exact age, but somewhere around that age. Yeah. And so Grandma wasn't home, Mom was outside doing the laundry, and I get the sewing machine here is open with a green apron on top of it that was in the middle of sewing. I took that out and grabbed a scrap piece of material that was lying on the side and pushed it under the sewing machine. Probably got about 3 stitches, and I stuck my finger right into it with the fabric. And it's one of these funny things that, so I'd sewn through my finger. It didn't break the needle, but then I ran and it's like I'm bleeding and crying to Mama. And so I was always very interested in that aspect. Starting at around age 6, couldn't keep me away anymore. Yeah. Playing dolls for me was making dresses for them. Yeah. I cut and triple cut every little piece of scrap fabric I could find. Yeah. And start sewing, little shirts and skirts and dresses for my dolls. Yeah. And so I kept some of those samples till recently. Yeah. My first full dress that I made I was 10. Yeah. And my mom showed me how to sew the pieces together to make it nice. And I kind of went from there. Yeah. A lot of it was self-taught, and my mom would guide me with techniques or items that I hadn't done before yet. Yeah. We moved to Canada when I was 17, and it was my, I'm pretty good at sewing at this point. And my cousin was getting married and asked me if I would do her bridesmaid dresses. And so they were relatively simple. Nothing too fancy that I hadn't done before. Yeah. There was a few things that were a little new to me. She wanted them lined and so on to make it more formal because I'd never done formal wear. And but that's sort of where it got started. Yeah. So I did hers, and then someone saw them and asked me if I would do them for another wedding, and so on. Until in the year 2000, 2001. It must have been 2001 that I was asked to do a wedding dress. Yeah. For someone who's going to have a very simple ceremony, and she didn't want to spend a whole lot on a wedding dress, and asked if I would make hers, and so I did. Which, I see how much I've changed and grown, and how I work now. I've forever altered patterns. They're a guideline to me, but I would always find ways of altering them to fit more what I wanted. Yeah. Smaller things like a higher neckline, a lower neckline, or I want the waistline in a different place, or things like that. So more the easy changes. Yeah. And for a few years, I would do that off and on. Occasionally, have a dress, and then somewhat, met another person who was working here, and she had connected me with a seamstress, a designer in Cuauhtemoc, and said that the designer was always looking for someone to help her out in busy times.
Yeah.
And so she introduced us, and one day we hadn't really settled on something official or formal, no official job offer, but just one day called and said that she was really busy for the next week or two, and if I could help her out.
Yeah.
And that's how I started working with her, and ended up staying there for 3 years.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And she had studied design and textile manufacturing, did much more couture, higher end things, handmade, and to order and so on.
Yeah.
She had techniques using a corset or built-in corset and so on that were new to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I could sew, but there's details to it that I was learning there. That's really where I learned my fluent Spanish. In school, I was always in Spanish taught schools, but because the students would mostly be Mennonite, then we would talk English or German, and I was never as comfortable in Spanish. But then I, stepping into this workplace where my boss and whoever else may be helping out, as well as most of the clients. I mean, I remember just a handful of Mennonite clients that would started showing up and coming there in part because I would be talking about it.
For sure.
So being surrounded with Spanish all day, every day, that's where I really started to speak it much more. And of course, then I had all the jargon of one industry there.
Yeah.
But it did help in just conversation a lot, and grew from there.